minutes before I have to clock in. But I wanted to come on here live and basically, explain to a lot of you who might be in the know, because I read a comment. If you will, from a fan at one of the Facebook group pages. I read a comment that stated, that some people, some of the newer generation, basically, that basically they enjoy, and hold on for a second. There's some noise all of a sudden just coming out of nowhere. It's almost like people know when you're doing a live stream or a video, they just got to get in on it. But anyway, like I was saying, folks, basically, I read a comment on one of the Facebook group pages focused on Sonic, and said that the reason you have these fans that respect Ian Flynn's writing and what he brings to the table is because he hasn't, they haven't been around, as long as we fans have when it comes to seeing what he is capable of. What he really is about when it comes to storytelling and stuff like that. And, basically, they're not, basically because they're not longtime fans, they're not as critical as we are as fans. And, and basically I think what he meant by critical is, calling out Ian, for, for a lot of the things that he does. I mean, I pointed out last night, if you will, during my video, which I also converted into an audio podcast you can find on my BW Rose's Discussions. I stated in there that the reason fans are worried about him with what's going on right now in the IDW Sonic comic, especially like with Tangle and Whisper, is, to me, and I'm sure everybody would agree with this, it tends to go back to the whole Mecha Sally situation from, almost a decade ago. When he went in that direction, yeah, like I said, we all kind of had an idea of exactly where they were going and everything, with the story, like what was the original plan. But, it's like the blueprint for it, and everything was fine. It's like everything was, okay and all that, blueprint wise. But outside of that, it just felt like, it fell flat. It's like it started off with some potential, and then it just went into a repetitive mode, and just, felt like it was the same story, over and over and over and over again. It just felt, it felt like nothing was really changing, if you will, at least until we got to the end. And that was about it. It felt like nothing really was, changing to pretty much, expand the story and make it better. And a lot of people also felt that he went too long with the story, just like he did with the Metal Virus arc, when he didn't really need to. It's like, okay, you're going to do fine, get to the point, stop dragging it along, get to the point, stop being, repetitive, and, finish off the story, get it done with. Stop dragging it on because you want to create your equivalent of the Endgame saga that Ken Penders, before, pretty much he lost his mind, according to a lot of folks, was part of and behind, back during the early pre-reboot days of the book, basically in the, the prime of the book, the Satayams, I guess you could say, inspired run of the book. That's how a lot of people felt about the Mecha Sally arc, including myself, and everybody felt about the Metal Virus arc in IDW. It's like, get to the point. But I think I think with Ian, it's something that's been with him since the beginning. You see, Ian Flynn, believe it or not, is a fan himself, or he started out as a fan himself. Now, you might say, well, how is that possible? Well, you see, Ian, under his fan name Ian Poto, if you will, which is Potto, created a webcomic. He created a webcomic called Other M. That's right, called Other M, which basically is short for Other Mobius, or Other Moebius, or whatever you want to call it. And this webcomic, which was scripturized, mostly done by him, was also artistically drawn by fellows that are still out there today. Fans like Bring on the Thunder, or Kiss the Thunder, if you will, Jay Foxfire, just to name a few. They were, artistically, helping to contribute to the story itself. They were helping to contribute to the story itself and stuff, artistic. But the story overall was vastly different than what you would read in the Archie books at that time. Because yes, the Archie books were getting a little bit more dramatic, and at times got dark when needed, But Other M, went in a completely different direction. Pretty much Other M was the R-rated equivalent, of the Archie books. That's what it was. It was the R-rated, very violent, very dark, very adult, at times. Not, not the adult, but not too adult, if you catch my drift, but very adult in themes at times, equivalent, or answer to Archie Sonic. That's what it was. And this story, went on for I don't know how many years, but it went on for many issues, if you will. As a matter of fact, I think it went up to almost, I would say 30, 50, some, I don't know how many issues, but it went out for a long time. And like I said, it was very, very graphic, very dark. And that was Ian Flynn's, all Ian Flynn's idea, under his Ian Poto name. Because he too was a fan, and like we fans even nowadays, he felt like, hey, what would happen if we went in a darker direction, if you will? We went in a darker direction with the Sonic comics. Like, we was like, what could we do with certain aspects of the comics that no one would dream of? And he went obviously with, the idea, obviously, of the other worlds, the other dimensions that Sonic and the Freedom Fighters would visit and visit and encounter and stuff. He went with that and figured what would happen if they went into a world that was very dark, very graphic, very violent, very, very unlike the world they were always known for. And Other M pretty much, was his answer to that. That's what it was. Other M, was his answer. And there's no getting around that. Even to this day, there's no getting around that. Except here. Just making sure my battery is charging while I'm talking about this. Because if I would have done this without charging the battery, it would have gone completely down, if you know what I mean. And who is this one? Yeah, somebody chatted but then took away their message. I don't know who that was, but thank you to those watching live. I know this is, right off the bat, but like I said, I'm trying to do this before work. But basically, Ian, like I said, he basically took that concept that, people like Penders had introduced alternate realities in the Archie Sonic verse and said, what if? And, he's went in a completely different direction than I think he expected it, and introduced us to another alternate world where things were a lot darker, a lot more violent, mature, basically a world to where, like I said, it's the R-rated, MA-rated, close to NC-17 rated Hold on for a sec. Got a train going by. But like I said, basically was the R-rated, NC-17, MA-rated, equivalent of, of Archie Sonic and Sonic Sat AM. That's what it was. And what's crazy is when he got on board. Even though it took a while, one of the Sonic Universe arcs he did was Dark Mobius. It was the Dark Mobius one. It was a silver story that he did. It was a loose adaptation of his other M series, his other M webcomic, in official capacity. But the only way he was able to get around to making that happen, obviously, was to include silver and make it a silver story, as well as include a character like a character like Lala Sue, who is the future child of Knuckles and Julie Sue, thanks to Ken Penders, and change her name to Janica. So he had to basically make some changes, add silver to the equation to get around the fact that he was basically going to, I think a lot of us knew this was going to happen the moment we heard he got hired on to be the new head writer. He was going to eventually put his story, his webcomic story, in the Archie Sonic comic in some capacity, some official form, and he did. And it was probably, one of the darker, even though it was now a silver arc or silver Lala Sue arc, basically this loose adaptation was, probably one of the darker ones ever in the comic, especially when you see some of the imagery. Like that last panel in the first issue with the, Interjack character, or that version of Interjack, which is, again, spoiler, once again, is Knuckles, because it's the second time Knuckles would get corrupted. This darker version of Interjack, behind him, you see what looks like a trophy wall of nothing but soulless bodies, because all the souls have been extracted from the bodies and turned into, pallets or palettes or whatever they're called. So yeah, I mean, you knew eventually he was going to do that, and he did. He eventually did. And you look at that and you're thinking, at first, like, why would Archie let that, slide? Why would Sega let that slide? And again, I think it's the fact that he had to work around, certain restrictions, to make that happen. To work around certain restrictions to make that happen. And, lo and behold, he eventually did. But Ian basically, the reason he can kind of like understand where a lot of us are coming, if you will, where a lot of us are coming from, is because he's a fan himself. And when he came on board, yeah, he tried to do a lot of things that he knew fans wanted to see get done. I mean, yeah, there were some things that he did that felt unnecessary, along the ways, but he did it basically from what he said to kind of clean things up, make things more organized, make things more streamlined, if you will, more simpler to follow and less cluttered. Which is why, at the beginning, he got rid of some characters that didn't really need to be there anymore, because, like, what else are you going to do with them? What else are you going to do with them? How are you going to use them next and all that? Which is why, you had one of his first arcs, the 3-part Darkest Story. So what is that? Sir Connery, or that horse guy, that Sir Connery horse guy. He killed him off. And then, of course, later on, you had him kill off Tommy Turtle, which a lot of people were happy to see gone, because it's like, what use did this guy have? What purpose did he have? So, he did a lot of, he did, a lot of things, At first it felt like, yeah, he shouldn't have killed them off that way, but hey, at least he's trying in his own unique style to simplify things, clean things up, and all that. And one of the first things and one of the other things he started to really work upon it, and you saw the hints of it in the comic, even from his first issue, was repairing the whole Sally and Sonic relationship. And I talked about that, and I said, look, despite how you feel about the guy, Ian does deserve credit for that, because if it wasn't for him, we probably wouldn't have gotten that repaired in the way we did. And you could tell, because when he talked about this last week during his Valentine's Day edition of the Bumblecast, which was focused on shipping, if you will, romantic shipping, and not just Sonic. But when he was asked that question, he brought up the infamous slap, and he said it in a way that felt like it still, that even even though it disgusted fans, till this day, even to this day, that it happened, that basically it even disgusted him as well, because again, like I said, he at one point was a fan, and I think he was a fan that essentially was still reading the comic like we were back when the slap happened. So for him to describe, the slap in a way like he did when he was trying to answer the question of, when he was trying to answer the question of, what gave him the idea to fix that relationship, you could tell even he wasn't happy about it. You could tell he didn't enjoy that moment occurred the way it did. Either script-wise, either it was script-wise written that way to happen or not, or artistically drawn to happen that way or not. You could tell he wasn't thrilled with it either, because like I said, he was a fan still at that time. Sure, he was probably coming on board, like he was probably getting some training, maybe shadowing, to coin a certain name of a certain black hedgehog, shadowing certain writers and all that to get an idea of, how he was going to approach the comic when he came on board as the new head writer, which was going to be vastly different than doing fan fiction. He too still was a fan. And obviously he saw and read what happened in 134 and said, no, that's not right. He saw what all his fellow fans at that time's reaction was. He still sees how they feel about it when it gets talked about and brought up. And it's like, yeah, he realized one of the major things he had to do, even right off the bat, with little hints, subtle hints here and there, was repair that relationship. And he did it by taking baby steps. He took it by taking the baby steps of essentially, basically taking the baby steps of essentially starting out by rebuilding the friendship and then going from there. And like I said in the video, /audio podcast, I even said that basically, Ian Flynn had the moments in there, where characters like Sally and Sonic kind of, in a way, acknowledged and admitted that each were at fault for what happened. And in a sense, they were. I mean, Antoine telling Sonic that the reason Sally acted the way she did, or has acted the way she has over the past several months, from a storyline timestamp wise, if you will, storyline continuity wise, timeline wise, whatever you want to call it, is because she, along with everybody else, thought Sonic had died. Over that past year, he didn't think was a year, but only a few weeks. She, along with everybody else, thought he had died. And then for Sally to admit to Bunny, while they're on the stakeout, and what was it, 173, I believe? In the stakeout and everything, for Sally to admit to Bunny that, yeah, she was at fault for the way she acted, for one, not even acknowledging until later on, her congratulations and everything to her and Antoine getting engaged to get married, but also admitting that the way she had been acting over the past several months, like I say, from a storyline, timeline scenario, was selfish of her, because she basically, forgotten what they were about, what they as freedom fighters were about. And that was putting the safety of their people and their world first before anything else. And she had forgotten that. And by her admitting her fault to even Bunny, and then later on kind of slowly getting back into being close friends with Sonic, even after the 175 anniversary three-parter, if you will, to me, again, he took the baby steps, he took the necessary steps needed to make it happen. And then after that, of course, being back to the way she was for a bit and all that, you had that moment between them before Sonic got kidnapped by Knack Louiseau and everything that I've mentioned before. And then, of course, you get into the three-part 200 anniversary issue, or not issue, but the three-part storyline that leads into the 200 issue. And you have Sally clinging on to Sonic basically before he goes in to confront Robotnik by saying, you be careful in there. Essentially still showing that she loves him and everything, but can't, really, not just verbalize it, but not really, want to go there just yet until I guess things are settled, things are all right and everything. Again, you could see the baby steps that were necessarily taken in the ways that they were. And then, of course, like I said, you have Iron Dominion, you have the whole situation with Monkey Kong and Ken Kong, if you will, and the way Sonic would react to that at times. And again, that was another necessary step needed to be taken, by the characters, thanks to Ian, to get them back together. Because what Sally saw, with Monkey Kong was essentially Sonic. That the personas at times are pretty much the same and everything, a little different here and there, but they were pretty much the same. And she realized that the feelings she had developed for Monkey Kong were basically the same kind of feelings she had developed for Sonic, and the reason she had fallen for Sonic in the first place. And so after that, what did we get? We got, basically, after the Iron Dominion arc happened, we had subtle hints, in moments, here and there, between them, leading up to 222. And what's crazy is you even have the Iron Dominion arc and its Journey to the East sub-arc in Sonic Universe showing Sally kind of getting back to the way she was by even giving us that iconic moment where she freaking punches Fiona right in the gut. And it's like, holy crap. Like, what? It's like, it's like you would have not seen that side of Sally, had people like Bowlers and Penders still been on board. Or maybe with Penders perhaps, but not really. But when Ian Flynn came around, it's like, you know what? One of the things that I was a fan of with Sally is she was always kind of sense. She would throw caution to the wind. She would get physical. She would get, basically let her actions speak louder than words when it came to certain events or certain, characters. And with Fiona, gut punching her in the gut the way she did, knocking the wind out of her, was essentially, to me, not only an iconic moment, and, with this version of Fiona justly deserved, but also I think that was Ian Flynn's way of saying, hey, as a fan, this is the Sally I and everybody else became a fan of. This right here is the moment where he basically said, this is the Sally that should have never left. Not because of, not just with the other things beforehand, like I said, with the 200th issue, the three-part, 175th issue, stuff like that. That moment in Sonic Universe, in my opinion, was Ian Flynn as a fan telling us other fans, this is the Sally we grew up with. This is the Sally we know of. Not the Sally we got before and all that. This is Sally. Someone that's going to basically look at someone like Fiona and not even say a word, and literally let her have it. Basically, literally let her have it. And she did. She did. But it's things like that when you look at, this, it's like you see that Ian Flynn is still a fan, and he understands where we fans are coming from with how we feel about things. Which is why when fans see what he did later on, after he did get Sally and Sonic together again in 222, when they see what he did later on by throwing that away and making Sally into Mecha Sally, which again made no sense in the eyes of a lot of fans, and for, well, I wouldn't say it didn't make no sense, but basically, going the route that he did and having it go for as long as he did, there were certain elements about it that didn't make sense. Like I said in the video yesterday, which is also a podcast now, which you can find on my BW Rose's discussions on all your favorite podcast locations. I said that one of the things that Ian Flynn did in that story arc with Mecha Sally, which still was very confusing to a lot of fans, is, how can you have, a power ring, that has been known in continuity of the comics and the show that the comics are kind of like that was basically starting to be more based on than ever before, Sonic's at AM. How can you take a power ring that's been known to free people from, the control of Robotnik's robotization? How can you use that and, in a modified way? How can you have someone like Eggman modify it to prevent free will from happening? It just did not make sense to a lot of folks. And here's the thing, on top of that, you have what a lot of fans, even myself nowadays, kind of look at as probably the most disturbing thing he's done, even off panel, by having Eggman pretty much gut and take Sally apart and basically rebuild her into a weaponized version. It's like you didn't have to do that. It's like to me, all you had to do was essentially just have, Eggman, as I once believed, just build armor over her. You didn't have to do it the way you did. But you look at everything that she was weaponized with, and it's like, you can't argue with what happened. I mean, even freaking Glitcher over at Divanart, who does the Sonic Retold series, which is a darker take on some story elements and storylines from Archie Sonic, Glitcher expanded, on that. Glitcher expanded on that scenario, and he added the fact that Eggman, not only took Sally apart, basically gutted her, but from Glitcher's point of view in the Sonic Retold, he basically pictured Eggman, because I think this is how we all envisioned it. Eggman not only, gutting Sally and rebuilding her into the weaponized version that she would become, but also by basically having Eggman take, what was her original body, but now roboticized, and burning it, essentially. Basically putting it into a furnace and melting it down into scrap. And even though this was part of a fan's interpretation of the storyline, a lot of fans didn't like it. They didn't like seeing this visual brought to life. I mean, one fan basically shouted on Twitter, "That was her body, you monster," only to be corrected by someone by saying, this is just a fan's interpretation. But I think Glitcher himself, probably wasn't a fan of this, but realized that if he was going to retell it, that he had to do it in a way that a lot of us envisioned, actually happening, but we didn't see. And again, you look at these scenarios, you look at, like I said, him modifying a power ring to prevent, and it's like, Ian, did you forget what power rings can do from a positive standpoint? And that does not make sense. That does not compute, if you will. And thankfully, I think he learned his lesson when he did Sonic Universe's Spark of Life in the post-reboot run of the comic, because instead, he had a red power ring help basically gives Nicole a super form known as overclocked Nicole. And at least he even rectified the fact that, yes, power rings help, kind of, I guess you could say, upgrade, certain abilities that everybody has, including Sally. So, so for him to do those things in the Mecha Sally arc, and then by extension, you have fans like Glitcher doing the Sonic Retold and giving us pretty much a more visual idea of what we all kind of interpreted at that time. It's like, forget, where he came from. Did he forget that at one time he was a fan himself? Because I think a lot of people feel that that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what occurred. That he forgot he's a fan himself. And then as a fan, he should better understand, oh, fans don't want to see something like this, but if I do it, I shouldn't have it go for so long. And that's how a lot of fans felt about the Mecha Sally arc. Heck, when the comic license moved over to IDW, when the comic license moved over to IDW, as I just take my time here, guys, hold on. I got about 18 minutes before I clock in. But when the license moved over to IDW, he gave us an idea that things were going to be a little bit different, maybe a little bit more darker at times, and more simplified. But I don't think anybody expected for him to do what he did, not even that long into the book. I mean, what were we? Were we not even at the 25th issue or anything? Not even the 20th yet? And in comes the Metal Virus arc. And not only does the Metal Virus arc come in, but basically like the Mecha Sally arc, it overstays its welcome. And just like the Mecha Sally arc, it became repetitive. I mean, there were a few things here and there, but it became repetitive. And it took, as I mentioned in the video and audio podcast yesterday, it basically took fan favorites like Vanilla, like a majority of the Chaotix, and even new fan favorite who wasn't even the comic that long, Tangle, and turned them into freaking Zombots. And it pissed a lot of fans off. Now, true, I mentioned that they did kind of miss an opportunity with the Zombot thing by basically having them all merged together into one big Zombot-like monster, and you just see them floating about within the Zombot blob monster that they merged into. You see all the affected just floating about in there. But, despite that being an opportunity that they missed out on, just like they missed out with the the roboticized masters in the first crossover between Sonic and Mega Man, despite that, it was an arc that just, again, I read some of it thanks to the trade paperbacks and stuff that Frank sent me. It just felt like it was an arc that dragged on for too long. It just felt like it dragged on for too freaking long. And it's like, when is enough enough? Or basically, when are you just going to get to the point? And I think that's what fans wanted in both arcs. Both the Mecha Sally arc and the Metal Virus arc. It's like, you didn't, like, to them, it's like, just get to the point. It's like, you didn't have to drag it out for this long and everything. You could have just, focused on what needed to be done and, get from point A, do that for maybe a few issues, then go to point B, do that for a few issues, and then finally conclude with point C for a few issues, and that's it. I mean, to a lot of folks, you could have just done this for like 6 issues or 9 issues at most, maybe even a year at the most, but not drag it out for as long as you did. I mean, like I mentioned yesterday, Mega Beatman, who does his True Blue reviews, here on YouTube, when he finally read the ending of this arc, you could tell in his voice that he was happy it was over. Like, finally, this thing is done. Because even, I believe, in my opinion, he felt that it dragged on for way too long. And it pretty much, in a sense, did. And you know what's crazy? Is everybody breathed a sigh of relief when Ian Flynn took a break from writing the Sonic comic, at IDW, and handed it over to Evan Stanley. And here's the thing, Evan Stanley's story didn't drag on for so long. Yeah, it may have had some hiccups here and there, but it didn't drag on for so long, and people were more appreciative of it because she understood, being a fan herself, that fans nowadays are not going to want to be in it for the long haul unless the story is good, unless the storyline is good and has purpose. I mean, everybody talks about the WWE's Bloodline storyline being one of the best in the history of the business, in the modern era, in the past decade or plus, and they're not wrong. And the reason for it is because it's got people invested. It's got the interest up, to this peak, to where they're going to want to see what happens next. They're going to want to see what the next chapter of the Bloodline storyline, which is close to concluding, is going to lead towards, and who's going to be involved. It's got their interest. It's got their interest. It's got them intrigued, But when they look at something like the Mecha Sally arc, things like the Mecha Sally arc and the Metal Virus arc, yeah, at first they started with potential, but then they dragged and became repetitive. And when finally they got a change of pace, if you will, writing-wise, yeah, the story went for several issues, but still, it was a breath of fresh air, and it didn't drag on long. It had a few hiccups, but it didn't drag on long. It felt like a change. It felt like a changing of the guard. But then, of course, Ian came back and everything, and now we're back to essentially a story arc that it's not dragging out as long as Metal Virus or Mecha Sally did. But still, there are moments in there that don't need to be, like the whole tension between Tangle and Whisper. And like I said yesterday, yes, we get it from a character standpoint. Whisper's been through a lot, even recently, and she's kind of relapsing. Looks like she's relapsing a little bit, and it's causing some dissension between her and Tangle. Now, some have given benefit of the doubt that, it just means Ian Flynn's going to end up making their friendship stronger than what it was, or a better understanding. And that might be true. But after what everybody's experienced with the Metal Virus arc, with the Mecha Sally arc and stuff, it's like, can they truly trust this man, with these characters? Now, like I said before, I don't think he's going to do anything to raise the ire, of Sega and by extension IDW. Thus, I don't think he'll damage the friendship between the two, but a lot of fans worry about him because of his past history and the fact that deep down he's forgotten that he was a fan first and foremost, and by forgetting he was a fan first and foremost, he's not realizing that, I should think about my ideas from a fan perspective. Like, what would the fans want? How would the fans want me to approach this, as a fan? A lot of people feel he's forgetting that. He's forgetting that, and that's not helping him. That's not helping him in the long run. It's not helping him in the long run. And, hopefully, after this is over, within the next, couple of months, he'll have a better understanding. Again, I still stick by what I said in that one video and podcast. I don't think he'll damage the Tangle Whisper relationship because, one, it's too popular with fans, and fans see them more than just best friends or close friends. And also, I don't think he's going to want to raise the ire of Sega, who owns these characters, and are probably a circle that he's part of. Yeah, don't break these two up, or else, that's not going to look good for you. So yeah, it's just one of those situations when you wonder who Ian Flynn is, especially if you're new to the Sonic lore, in the IDW comics, or you came late to the party during the final, years or final issues of the Archie Sonic. If you want to know who Ian Flynn is, Ian Flynn basically, as I mentioned, is a fan. He's a fan that started out with the other M comic, which was, like I say, a darker take, very darker take than what you would see in Archie and Sonic Sat AM. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, he started out as a fan to write for the comic. He did some things at first to basically clean things up, make it less cluttered. He made some decisions here and there that weren't, so popular at times, but also did some things that he knew as a fan needed to be corrected, like the Sonic Sally deal. But then he went and, did what he did with the whole, then he did what he did with the whole Mecha Sally deal after that. And it's like, you started to see kind of like some things that he was doing that didn't sit well with fans. And even though, like I said, a lot of us knew what the intentions were with Mecha Sally and everything, and even the Metal Virus and IDW, it's like, again, the main, I guess you could say, the main point that they were trying to make to him is, yeah, we get what you were going at with both stories, but you didn't have to drag them out as long as you did, because you want to try to create your own magnum opus that's the equivalent to what Endgame was by Ken Penders. Because when you look at Endgame, and again, this was before a lot of people felt Ken had lost his freaking mind. Endgame basically was essentially a 4-part story, well, 4.5 if you count the director's cut we got later on, 4.5, 4.5-part story that did everything it had to do within that span of 4.5 issues. It had to do within the span of 4.5 issues, and the build-up we got to it throughout various issues was great. You had build-up, you had intrigue and everything, and it wasn't dragged out. And as soon as we got to Endgame, guess what? It was a perfect conclusion. It hit all cylinders when it needed to hit them. It basically hit all the, the things that need to, touch upon when need to be done. Not only did it keep people invested and intrigued for those 4 issues, it didn't drag. It wasn't repetitive. And this is why a lot of people consider it the magnum opus of the overall Sonic comic, I guess you could say history. Both IDW, Archie, and by extension Fleetway. This is why they consider it the best of the best. And why you're seeing people like Ian Flynn, through Archie, through IDW, try to do the magnum opus, their own Endgame, through things like the Mecha Sally deal and things like Metal Virus. And to me, if I was to say Ian Flynn achieved that, I would have to say he achieved that post-reboot, if you will, with the, with the whole Sonic Unleashed, I guess you could say the whole Sonic Unleashed arc is what he did. That's when he accomplished it. With the whole Sonic Unleashed Tour 3, if you will, arc. That's when he accomplished it. That's when he pretty much accomplished it, in my opinion, is with that arc. The whole Return of the Freedom Fighters, Panic in the Sky, basically he accomplished it with the whole Return of the Freedom Fighters, Sonic Unleashed, Panic in the Sky arc. That's when he accomplished it. That was his magnum opus. And if you want to look, that was his equivalent of Endgame. And if you want to add an extension to it, Spark of Life, along with the help of his wife, Elia Baker, was another example of accomplishing that and doing it in a way that wasn't repetitive, but very intriguing, and it kept people invested, for the duration of the story. That's what it did. It kept people invested for the duration of the story. And basically, it didn't bore people. And it didn't want people basically wanting to, gouge, Ian's eyes out, or basically, look over his shoulder and make sure, are you doing this the right way? Are you doing it in a way that's going to please the fans? You better not do something that's going to piss the fans off. It wasn't done. It wasn't, done in that manner, or have that kind of effect. But you look at Mecha Sally and Metal Virus, and they do have that effect of fans wanting to gouge his eyes out, fans wanting to get in his face and tell him, rewrite this whole thing, but make it shorter. Make it 9 issues, make it 6 issues, and that's it. It didn't make them want to look over his shoulder to make sure he was not pissing us off. So, yeah, basically, in the end, Ian Flynn, at his core, is a fan. And a lot of people feel that he's forgotten that that's who he is and who he's been first and foremost. So, yeah, that's basically who Ian Flynn is at the core. And why a lot of fans feel that he's forgotten that, and he needs to remember that's who he was first and foremost to understand what the fans want. But anyway, though, guys, I just wanted to come on here, do this little live stream, if you will, which will become a podcast later, hopefully. But let me know what your thoughts are. Thank you all for joining me live. I got to clock into work now, guys. And until next time, I will talk to you later. But yeah, thank you for joining me on this little live stream on talking about who Ian Flynn is. And hopefully those that might be new to this have a better idea and conception of who they're dealing with when it comes to the IDW Sonic comics.